And it's that kind of stuff that's just not appropriate for the real energy system work of football. So, like I said, it's multiple bouts of high intensity work with incomplete rest periods, and that would lead you to believe that football is an anaerobic alactic sport. And though it does place a great demand on those energy systems, because of the repeated, one play is an anaerobic alactic sport. But when you link, 4 to 10 of them, or 3 to 10 of them, 3 to 15 of them in a row for a drive, and then, rest for 5 minutes and then do it again, and rest for 5 minutes and do it again, there's also a big aerobic component to it. And I'm going to address how we attack all of those energy systems. And obviously it's a sport that requires speed, agility, mobility, durability, technique, all right, which some of you guys are position coaches and some of you are just physical preparation coaches, so you'll have a varying amount of influence you can place there. But that is so important. The importance of that can never be lost. Special strength, explosive strength, maximal strength, alactic capacity, and aerobic capacity. All those things are what need to be addressed, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is how we address that. And so I said the first thing you got to do is look at the game. All right. So we understand the parameters of a play, of a quarter, of a series, of a quarter, of a half, and of a game. But we would be doing our players a disservice if you do not look at the player, not the game. All right. Just because a play lasts 3 to 6 seconds, all right, those 3 to 6 seconds consist of very different things for an offensive lineman than they do for a cornerback, all right? And it seems so like, yeah, Chad, you're not fucking telling me anything new right now, but people miss it. People don't, they fail to do this, and they train their players incorrectly because of it. So as we're looking at the players, not the game, think about what linemen do. Linemen are gonna run, 1 to 20, 30 yards at most on a play with a lot of contact. Big skill guys, this is how I divide my guys up as linemen: big skill, small skill. Big skill guys being linebackers, tight ends, fullbacks, and depending on the system and the scheme, running backs, quarterbacks, and safeties may fall under big skill, or they may fall under small skill with wide receivers and corners. So, if you got a pro style quarterback and he's just dropping back, he's a big skill guy. You got RG3 and, he might be running for 80 yards on the play. So he's probably a small skill guy. And the same thing with the running backs. That big ass bruiser you guys had 2 seasons ago.
Ganaway.
Yeah, Terrence Ganaway. He's a big skill guy. Latch AC strong, small skill guy. It's just. And then with the safeties, that's just the defensive scheme you run. You get more of these teams running like a 3-3-5, and they've got whatever they call those. They're half strong safeties, half linebackers, and every team has like a different name for them. Like Arizona, they call them. They run that, and they call those guys wildcats, and whatever they are. If they play that kind of position and they're or a John Lynch kind of strong safety, and he's up on the line, playing in the tight end's face all the time, he's probably a big skill guy, not a small skill. So as you're looking at the big skill guys, they're going to run 10 to 40 yards on most plays, and small skill guys are going to run 10 to 50 yards. And obviously, as you're coming down from lineman to small skill, the amount of contact they have on the play changes. Lessons with each one. And as simple and intuitive as that sounds, you got to consider all of those things. Weights that they're going to do for 3 reps, but they feel like they could do for 5 or 6. But the bar's moving explosively. And is that going to make you the best powerlifter in the world? No, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Football players don't need to be the greatest weight room guys, and I'd even say that very rarely will you see that your best weight room guys are actually your best football players as well. Your guys who maybe test the best in sprints and jumps might be your best football players, but the body type and stuff that's going to favor a guy benching 500 pounds or squatting 700 pounds, 9 times out of 10 it isn't going to be your best football player. And that is because weights are a facilitator to movement, all right? If you have a player that squats 700 pounds, sure, that's great. You know, I would be pretty pumped if I had one of my college guys could do that. You know, I would be like secretly inside myself cheering all the time. But the fact of the matter is that he can squat 700 pounds, but if his squat going from 550 pounds to 700 pounds didn't make him run a faster 10, or didn't make him run a faster 20 or 40 or shuttle, or jump higher or jump further, right? Then what the fuck was it good for, you know? And it's so easy to get caught up in the numbers, you know, because then you can go on the CBS Freaks of College Football list and say, well, I got the guy that benches this much and squats this much, and it's so easy to quantify, you know, even to your head coach, you know, who's more or less your boss in most situations, like, well, all our bench presses went up by an average of this much, and our squats went up by an average of this much. And it's such a simple relationship that someone's going to think, oh, they got stronger, so they became better football players. But it's not. You know, the relationship is not that simple. And the higher level you get to, the better player you deal with, the more complex that relationship becomes. And you get into things that are very difficult, maybe even impossible to measure, you know, with a number, unless you've got some more sophisticated equipment, you know, GPS technology and that kind of stuff to really measure how fast and how powerful your athlete's movements are, you know, because even with an electronic timing system, you're not going to time very well some guy how fast he's going from his stance to hitting the D lineman, you know, a quarter of a second later. So can't really time that accurately. There's GPS and stuff that can do that, but it's really expensive, so maybe you guys can get it. But yeah, so that's what we have to keep in mind. That weights are a facilitator to movement, and that their squat going up is great, but is that improvement in the squat yielding an improvement in drills with higher carryover, higher transfer to their football performance? You know, and yes, I think a broad jump or a standing triple jump has a higher correlation than the squat, and it's, you know, that's going to have a higher correlation maybe for a small skill guy, and perhaps the squat's going to have a higher correlation for the lineman. But make sure you're improving the stuff that's important to improve. And as I said, most of the time, yes, the squat going up is gonna make that athlete faster, jump higher, jump farther, throw farther, whatever it may be. But the point of diminishing returns, I think, is a lot sooner than people would like to realize. You know, that is it worth the energy and effort to take even a college lineman squat, you know, from 500 to 600? You know, how much effort do you have to put in to do that? Are you directing your effort at taking his squat from 500 to 600? That's a much different thing than if his squat goes from 500 to 600, though you're directing your efforts towards his movement drills and then sub-maximal weights. You know, so that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve, is almost a happenstance improvement of weight room numbers because of a directed improvement of explosive drills and SPP drills, which are going to have a higher transfer from what I was talking about. But so practice is the only thing that's irreplaceable. So what is the role of practice when it comes to physical preparation? All right, practice often gets overlooked as a part of training because there's not a barbell in your hands or on your back, or you're not jumping on a box, or you're not running a sprint with the coach standing there with a stopwatch, all right? And we've kind of compartmentalized the idea of training to those things. But in practice, you're going to sprint, you're going to cut, you're going to block people, you're going to tackle people. You know, you have to overcome the resistance of an opponent, all right? All of those things are training, and all of them must be accounted for. Yes, it is more difficult to quantify you know, the volume and intensity of hitting the sled than it is, you know, doing reps on the bench. So it's not going to be an exact a measurement, but you got to take it into account. You know, the volume of running that's done in practice should be, you know, will be more easily calculated, and that definitely needs to be taken into account because there's a finite amount of work that your athletes can do. Right? Charlie Francis, and I'll talk about Charlie Francis all the time. And I go back and read these Charlie Francis articles and think to myself, like, I read this and I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, that's the way that I should do it. Why doesn't everyone do it like that? Like, it's the most, he has the most simple answer, you know, the most intuitive answer. And it's almost too simple and too intuitive, I think, that people discount, like, oh, that can't be right. That makes too much sense for it to be right. But it really is. And if you haven't read his stuff, please go and do that. T Nation actually has a lot of great Charlie Francis articles. They're just from like 10 years ago. But they're great, and his website, you know, going through the forums and the old posts in there. I mean, how often can you get one of the greatest track and field coaches ever posting on an online message board, like dropping real knowledge on people? So Charlie would use this analogy of a cup. All right, your central nervous system is a cup, and it has a finite capacity to it. All right, every stress that you impose on your body, all right, whether it is sprinting, whether it is lifting, whether it is practicing, whether it is getting in a fight with your girlfriend and sleeping shitty, whether it's, you know, being stressed out about a project at work or something that you have to do for school, that all imposes, all right, some level of stress to the body and is going to fill up that cup to some degree, all right? And that cup's capacity is finite, so when that cup overflows, you are overtrained, all right? And that is one of the #1 things that we need to protect against. So that's why you have to account for practice in an effort to not overflow that cup. You know, and you guys will all have kind of varying degrees of influence when it comes to what happens at your guys' football practice, all right, or any other sports you work with. So a lot of times you're going to have to be reactive in adjusting what you do to not cause an overflow of that cup. You know, if they have a ton of work that they did at practice, and you can't do anything to change that when they get to you. So it's your job at that point to not overflow the cup, because as great as it is to run 4.40s and to bench 500 pounds and do all that kind of stuff, practice is the most important thing. It's the only irreplaceable thing. All right, they're not gonna become shitty football players if they only go up to a heavy set of 5 instead of working up to, you know, or maybe do 3 sets of 5 instead of working up to a 3 rep max that day. You know, that's gonna be a lot better end game than you being like, oh, you just had a hard as shit practice. Well, now let's 3 rep max squat. You know, and then the cup is overflowed. And for anyone who has truly been overtrained, and it is a real thing, it's bad. It's bad, and it takes a while to come back from.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to get into this GPP block to kick off the off season. So we're out of the restoration block. We're into this GPP block. GPP block, you want to see them as frequently as you can. You know, it's going to be high frequency and low to medium intensity training, and it's all about the breadth of the training and limiting their outputs. All right, weight room stuff is simple to limit the output by. You just assign a percentage, just a lower one. You know, more in the 55 to 75% range, 55 to 70% range. You know, I prefer to do a lot of sets of 3 to 5, maybe up to 8 reps, just because, as opposed to doing higher. So I want to get my volume that way. A lot of sets of medium reps as opposed to fewer sets of higher reps. And if you're familiar with my book, The Juggernaut Method, or Juggernaut Method 2, talk about the inverted Juggernaut method, why I made the change from doing 5 sets of 10 at 60% to 10 sets of 5 at 60%. Because if you're doing 5 sets of 10, maybe the first set, all 10 look good, you know. And the second set, 8 look good and 2 look bad. And the third set, 6 and 4, and 5 and 5, and 4 and 6. Well, you just had, you know, 20 reps or whatever that was of ingraining bad technique, all right? But if I do 10 sets of 5, much higher likelihood that all 50 reps look great, and that's what we want, all right? All of them to be technically sound, explosive, powerful, you know, just crisp reps. So that's how I like to get that volume, is through a higher number of sets, a moderate number of reps. So if I'm looking at setting up a 5-day training week in this GPP block, weights wise, I'll just upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, all right? And then pairing field work with that, running, so sprints, jumps, throws, and aerobic work, done via tempos, and make sure I can come back to tempos in a second. During that time period, I want to spread out, all right, my primary stressors. I want to consciously limit their outputs. So on Monday, we will sprint or do sprint-related work with their upper body weights. Sprint, jump, upper body weights. Tuesday, tempos, aerobic work, throw, lower body weights. Wednesday, same as Monday. Tuesday, same as Thursday. Friday, same as Monday and Wednesday. All right? And why am I putting the sprints and the lower body weights on opposite days of each other? All right? If I sprinted on Monday, I'm not going to be able to squat as well on Tuesday. And if I squat on Tuesday, I'm not going to be able to sprint as well on Wednesday. Well, that is by design. All right? That is by design because we're limiting, we're working more frequently, so they don't need to have as high, I don't want them to have as high outputs, because I need to give it the year flexibility to be able to have really high outputs later in the year. But if we start doing that right away, how do I give them more recovery? You know, you have to set up your training so you can take stuff away, because you can't consistently just keep adding and adding and adding to the work they do. So as we take stuff away, we are adding intensity to the work they do. We're adding quality to the work they do. So it is by design that we will sprint and do lower body weights on opposite days at that part of the year, because we're limiting their output abilities on the sprint work by doing different drills, like hill sprints. Even though hill sprints are hard, you know, and they will develop the special strength necessary to run faster, you can't sprint as fast on a hill as you can on flat land. So it is not as stressful to the body, purely because it's not at as high a velocity. If you're not moving at as high a velocity, there's much less likelihood that you suffer a soft tissue injury like a hamstring pull. All right, hamstring pulls happen at max velocity speeds. All right, and you know, with improper running mechanics, lack of warm up, that kind of stuff. But assuming they look good running and they're warmed up properly, hamstring pulls will really only happen in a max velocity running situation. So you can sprint on, or you can squat on Tuesday and run hills on Wednesday and not be worried about, well, or is half my team about to pop their hammy, all right?